Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Baker, and this is Mama Stories. I created Mama Stories after seeing how impactful sharing stories can be in overcoming the challenges of motherhood. I am where I am today because of the stories of so many amazing, strong mamas, and I want to share that with every mom I can. So follow along to laugh, cry, and be empowered. Thanks for tuning in to today's show. Have you heard about how we are changing the story for moms? Mama Fund is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to providing products, services, and education to moms in need. So check us out at mamafund.org. All right, so today on the podcast, we have Shannon. Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I guess having me at your house. Why don't we start off with you just telling us a little bit about who Shannon is?
Sure. So my name is Shannon Leach, and I am a mom of 3. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I'm also an online health and fitness coach.
Okay. And you have 2 babies growing in your belly right now.
Yes, I'm pregnant with twins.
So exciting.
And I'll get to it in a little bit, but a big part of our story is that all of our kids are from IVF treatments and fertility treatments.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with your motherhood journey then.
Sure.
So how old is your oldest?
She will be 5 in December.
Okay, 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So walk us through what it was like to become a mom.
Sure. So where do I begin? I played college soccer, and shortly after I stopped, this might be TMI, but I
Never TMI.
I didn't have periods, and so at the time, my mom was kind of concerned, and I was a little bit too. And I went back to school in Rochester, New York, for nursing school, and saw a doctor there, and he was like, "Yeah, you're not trying to have kids right now. It's no big deal. Let's not worry about it." And so I didn't really think much more of it. And then I was training for marathons, and after we got married, I talked to my doctor, and I was actually training for the Boston Marathon. I ran in the year of the bombing, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, that's a whole nother story. But
so you were there when that happened?
Yeah, and thankfully, so I had finished, and my mom, dad, sister, and husband were all there with me, and they were all with me at the time. And so we were about 2 blocks from the finish line, and thankfully didn't see anything or get hurt. But
Wow.
So yeah, sorry, that's total tangent. But so I'd been training for that, and my OB had said to me, I guess she was my gynecologist at the time, but she had said, let's get through marathon training, because that can be pretty intense on your body. Let's see how things kind of regulate after you're done training. And so I got done training. We gave it that whole summer, and still nothing had changed. And so she said, I'm going to refer you to Seattle Reproductive Medicine to kind of go from there. And so we met with our doctor, I think that August, and they ran a bunch of tests and figured out that I don't ovulate. It's something called hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, quite the mouthful.
Do they have an acronym? Because I feel like I would not remember that.
I know. I don't think they do. Anyways, the biggest part, what it means is that I don't ovulate. And so I just don't produce the estrogen and progesterone that most women do in order to ovulate. And so I was told that there essentially was not going to be a chance that I'd be able to conceive on my own. And so they gave us the option of starting with artificial insemination, or now they call it IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. And we did 2 rounds of that, neither of which worked.
Which is where they like inject your husband's sperm
into
you? Okay,
yes.
So it's not like egg retrieval.
No.
At this point. Okay.
Yep, at this point. So it was just, they gave me, it was a medicated one for me since I don't ovulate on my own. So I did shots for that as well. And before that, sorry, I can back up a little bit. They tried to, induce a period and do it with just oral medications, but that didn't work. So then we moved on to the intrauterine insemination. And then they give me the meds that help me to ovulate. Okay. And then injected his sperm. And so we did 2 rounds of that, neither of which took, to which my doctor said, we can try again, but the odds are really, really low that this will work.
And so how long does each round take? Like, is that weeks in between or months in between?
So with the artificial insemination, we were able to do it I would say at the most like 6 weeks between.
Okay.
And so then she talked about IVF, and at this point it was there's something I had known nobody really that had gone through it. One of my sister's friends had, which was really good because she was a resource for me in the beginning when I really knew, like, none of my friends had dealt with it. Nobody I knew. And so it was a really kind of lonely journey in the beginning. And so our first round we started it late. I guess it would have been 2013. And I ended up joining a fertility support group through Seattle Reproductive Medicine, which was one of the best things I could have ever done because, like I said, it was just such a like dark and lonely road and so unknown and just so many aspects of it, like the physical aspect of your getting these medications and your body's kind of going a little bit crazy with these new hormones and, you know, the emotional side of it, like, will this work? Will I ever become a mom? Because it's something that you, I don't know, as a woman, I guess you never question. Most people inherently, not everybody wants to become a mom, but so many women do. And so when you think that that might not be possible and you think, gosh, my body's supposed to do this thing so naturally, like, why isn't it doing this? So having that support group and all these people going through it was really, truly like one of the best things I've ever done.
And was this group all women that were going through it for the first time, or had some of them been through it before?
Some had been through it before, but a lot of the group, it was going through the first time. So there was a couple of us who were basically had our like egg retrievals at the same time. And so I guess I can share a little bit of like what the process looks like for anybody that hasn't been through it or is going through it, kind of what to expect. So for me, again, it was a medicated one, and everybody's story is a little different because everyone has a different diagnosis and what they need in order to help them either ovulate, or maybe it's the husband that has the fertility problem, or, you know, their egg quality is down or whatever it might be. So mine was always for the IVF cycle to get the retrievals medicated. And so that's generally shots in your stomach, and can be, sometimes I had them 3 times a day.
Oh my gosh. That you're admitting into your stomach?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so thankfully I'm a nurse practitioner and I'm a nurse, but it's so different when it's yourself. I have no problem giving other people shots, but when it's myself, and my husband doesn't do super good with needles either. So I would always just be like, okay, leave the room. And he fainted once when he was a kid from needles. So,
you were like, please leave the room.
Stay away.
Yeah.
And most people, end up doing the shots and the medications for, I would say 8 to 10 days before their body's ready for a retrieval. My body just took a really long time. I was kind of a slow responder. So I ended up typically doing closer to like 2 weeks to 16 days, I think was my longest time. They call it your stimming or stimulation from the medications. And so you're giving yourself these shots, and then they'll bring you in. Usually they don't do it until you're at least like 6 days into the cycle of the medications. They check your blood levels and they do an ultrasound. And so I live about 25 miles north of Seattle. So I would be driving down for these appointments, and I would have to do it. The first one that they open, I generally start work at 6:30, but they don't open till 7:45. So I would be leaving my house at 6 to get there by the 7:30, 7:45 appointment. Sometimes it would be like a 20-minute appointment. I'd turn around, go home, drive the 45 minutes home. So you're having all this frequent monitoring, and they're monitoring and trying to see, like, are your follicles that hold the eggs, are they growing at the same rate? And then at the point that they want them to grow to, it's like such an exact science. It really is remarkable to me, but they have to get to a certain point and certain size that to have the best chance when they take them out, that they'll be mature eggs that then can fertilize. And so they do all this monitoring, and then they get to a point where like they're okay, you're going to do your trigger, is what they call it, at a specific time. And so what that is an injection into your butt that helps you then release the eggs, so that then when they go in and they can get them out of the cavity. So then basically, I think it's 36 hours from the time that you give the shot is when then you'll go in for the egg retrieval. And so you do go under general anesthesia. And they go in and they use a teeny tiny needle to basically like pop the follicles and then get the eggs out and extract the eggs. And I was never one that produced a ton of eggs. Like some people, they'll do the retrievals and they have like 20 or 30. And the most I ever had was 10, and 9 respectively. I've done 3 rounds of IVF. And so, that first round we got 9 eggs, and, we ended up with 3 embryos. And a lot of times, your doctor will recommend how many you put in based on your age, your risk factors, how likely it is that you'll have success with IVF. And so our clinic and most clinics, for my age at this time, I was just 29, and they recommended just 1, but I had seen enough friends and heard enough stories of like they'd put in 2 and only 1 would take or neither would take. And so in our mind, it was like giving us the best chance, I guess. So we put in 2 our first time and neither took. And I remember, and I'm sorry, I'll probably get emotional when I talk about this, but I remember getting the phone call that day, and I was sitting on my couch and I'd been waiting all day long because I didn't do a pregnancy test that first time because someone had said sometimes they're false positives because the shot you give yourself before the retrieval is HCG. And so sometimes it can show up still on the pregnancy test. And so she had strongly recommended, like, don't test beforehand. And so I didn't. And so I was waiting for that call. And I just remember her saying, Shannon, I'm so sorry it didn't work. And I just thought, I mean, in my mind, it was like, this is never going to work. I'm never going to become a mom. And it really was like one of the hardest, most difficult times I've been through because I had no idea if I was ever going to become a mom. Thankfully, we had 1 frozen embryo left from that round. And so we had the failure in January of 2014. And then we were able to transfer the frozen embryo in March.
Because it takes like time for your body to heal?
Yeah, like recover. And then you have to start new meds. So then for the frozen cycle was actually a little bit different. I did like estrogen patches and then progesterone support as well. And some people get progesterone shots in the butt, which I did for my frozens. And those are nightly for like 12 weeks throughout once you get pregnant. Yeah. And so that one my husband did have to help with periodically, but usually I could do it myself. But it's this really thick, viscous, it's progesterone in oil. So you're like pushing it. So to do it one-handed to yourself is quite challenging.
Wow.
So we did the frozen one, and I was sitting at work when we got the phone call, and she said, Shannon, it worked. You're pregnant. And I sobbed, and I just remember just thinking, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this. And thankfully I had, so then they're really, really good about, they bring you in. So you literally find out when you're like 4 weeks to the day. So
super early.
And I'll go back again too, sorry, because once they do the retrieval, then you find out the very next day how many actually fertilized. So they'll give you the phone call, and usually there's like an attrition rate of like from one day to the next to about 50%, they say. So to start out with 9 was a little bit scary. So that we ended up with 3 embryos was pretty amazing. I've never had a lot of quantity, but thankfully I've had good quality of eggs.
Yeah.
And then they give you a report. Some clinics will give you like daily reports, but ours would give you that first day one. And then for our first cycle, they give us a report on day 3, and they'll tell you how many are still there. And then, but this last cycle, our third cycle, they didn't give us an update until day 5, which is the day you come in to transfer. And so you could wake up that morning, they could call you and say, I'm so sorry, none made it. Or you can show up and they say, this is how many made it. And so we ended up with that one frozen that then is now Brooklyn, who will be 5 in December. And so after that, then they'll bring you in around the 6-week mark for an ultrasound, make sure, everything's looking good. And they kind of determine when from there to release you to your OB. And I found my OB is like the best in the world is Dr. E. Bernstein at Providence Medical Group. But for every pregnancy of mine, like she just knows my story and everything I've been through. Yeah. So she will bring me in as much as I want, like, way more than normal pregnant ones do. Yeah. And just to hear heart tones and ultrasounds. Yeah. Because it's really scary. I mean, for anybody, I think for any woman, especially pregnancy that first trimester. Scary, yeah. Because we know that miscarriage is very real and happens to so many people. We know that, so many people struggle with infertility. It's 1 in 8, which I've learned, which is, wow. a huge number. And so, she was really good about like just more frequent checks, and my, initial OB appointment was always super early, and I had way more ultrasounds than others might, which is a huge blessing. And the only thing different throughout the pregnancy, for my last 3 was that they would do also like they called it a fetal echocardiogram, which is just basically a really detailed ultrasound of the heart, because there's higher risk for congenital anomalies for fertility babies for whatever reason. And then I was always in the maternal fetal medicine clinic too, because I had been through IVF, because there's different risks. But thankfully, with all 3 of my kiddos, so we ended up doing 3 total rounds of IVF. The first round, Brooklyn was our frozen, and the last of that one. And every time I went through, it's funny because people think like once you've had success, then, it wouldn't be difficult, or you already know it. And every time it's just this huge emotional roller coaster, because you're going through like, are the eggs growing at the same rate? Are we even going to get any eggs from the extraction? Are any going to fertilize? And then if those that fertilize, how many are going to actually make it to embryos? And we never did genetic testing on the embryos themselves. A lot of people will do that, and you have to freeze them to do that. But we kind of just wanted one little piece, I guess, to be left to God or fate or whatever you believe in, just because so much of it is so scientific. And so like, every step of the way you're knowing everything. So our second round, we also got 3 embryos, and we transferred 2 for our fresh cycle. And Jameson is our middle son. He'll be 3 in July. He was the only one that stuck with those 2. And then our third and final frozen from round 2 was Madden. He's now 16 months. And it's just weird to think about, because had they transferred Madden and Jameson's at the same time, they could have been, fraternal twins, but they didn't. And then I just wonder how our life would have like changed if we had had twins at that point. And so we decided, I grew up in a family of 4 kids, and my husband grew up from a family of 3. And so we always kind of said we wanted 3 or 4 kids. And so we had our 3, and they're obviously very close in age, and some people think we're nuts for that. But part of the reason is because with infertility and IVF, like you never know if it's going to work. And so, and it could take, years, or it could, if you're super lucky, it happens the first time, but for most it doesn't. Yeah. And, we had our own failures. And so we always kind of thought, if they're somewhere like close to 2 years apart, great. If it's sooner, great. If it's longer, like we'll just deal with that, So our first 2 are 18 and a half months apart, and then 18 and a half months apart. And so we're like, okay, and decided that we would do it just one more time. And because at this point we had no more embryos. And again, it's just an emotional roller coaster physically. Like I would have bruises all over my stomach, and that piece is hard. And then your body's kind of responding to the hormones. And then financially it's just horrible how expensive it is. And I find that I feel so sad for some people that like that's their only option to get pregnant, but literally can't afford it. And I feel very blessed that we've been able to from that standpoint. And I really do. I have this big like dream of mine that one day I would love to be able to sponsor like one family a year to do fertility treatment that otherwise couldn't do it, just because it's the only way that like we are able to have a family. So we did this last round, and again, like my body was just kind of slow to respond, but everything was looking great. We actually got 10 eggs and 10 fertilized, which never happens. Wow. I mean, usually like with our other 2, I think 5 had fertilized, and my friend who actually works at Seattle Reproductive was like, I've never really seen that, like that they all fertilized. And But then when we got to the day of transfer, they said, we have 2 to transfer today, and they counsel you a lot because, the risk of putting in 2 is that you'll get twins, or you could even get triplets or whatever. And are you sure
because they can split? You're saying, okay,
mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and so some people they'll put in 2 and 1 splits, and then they have triplets, or you put in 1 and they could split even. So they counseled us a lot on that, but again, because we had 2 other fresh cycles where neither took, and then 1 took, we're like, we feel strongly about this, and we had 3 more growing out at that point. And they were going to call us the next day to say how many made it. And we did the transfer. And one thing I've always done with every transfer is, there's a woman and her sister who work, their partner was Seattle Reproductive. They're acupuncturists. And so did a treatment before and after. And this time I found this, app called Mindful IVF. That's a meditation app. And so I did that before, and it was like a really calming, like peaceful experience. And the next day we're out for a walk, and I got a call saying that none of the other embryos had made it. And for anyone that's been through it, like, it feels like a total loss, because you envision it as like a future child, right? And so at that point I was pretty devastated. But I also thought, you know what? Like, if this isn't successful, like I was totally at peace with like where we're at. We've been so blessed that the fact that we've gone through IVF 3 times, and we've done how many transfers? 1, 2, 3, 4 transfers.
Wow.
And then had our 3 kids. So I got to this place of like, whatever is meant to be, this is just meant to be. And a few days before we tested this time, I was like, I would get waves of nausea. And I was just like really tired. And so I was like, maybe both of them took, but
you just had a feeling.
Yeah. But not really thinking that it would, because it never has worked.
Well, and you probably don't want to get your hopes up.
Right.
I think that's a lot with IVF. From what I've just heard, is like, it's a big roller coaster of like, you have to kind of match like what you thought motherhood was going to be like in this plan, that we all have in our mind, to like, okay, it actually is like a equation of how this is going to work, and it's not up to me, and there's not a lot of control that I have.
Right. And I think that's the hardest thing, is the lack of control. Because in so many aspects of our life, like, we have control over so many things. And this, you have no control. Like, you can control what you put in your body, your like the things that you can control, you try to. But aside from that, it's just like, you just have to give it up to medicine and science and your team and God, if you believe in God, which, I do, but, so there's just so much unknown, and you really have to like relinquish any expectations that you had. 'Cause, if you had asked me years ago, if I thought my vision or my journey to motherhood would be this way, I would have had no clue what it would look like. But, I'm also just grateful that it's worked for us, 'cause I know that there are so many it hasn't for, which absolutely breaks my heart. 'Cause, I know what it's like to be on the other side of it, and wondering if it will ever work for you too, when you see other successes. And actually, since I started a Facebook support group, which has over 100 women now, which has been really great, but it was just, I wanted to be able to give some other people outlet. And then it helped me as well, because like I said in the beginning, it was, such a lonely and dark time, and you just feel pretty isolated. And even though like my husband's the most amazing support system and always has been, but it's just different, and you just need people that have been there and are going through it and everything. But anyways, I totally digressed a little bit.
Hey guys, are we best friends yet? Make sure that you are following Mama Stories on Instagram and Facebook at The Mama Stories. Also, you can check us out at mamastories.com. There you can read, share, and even sign up to be on this podcast. So go do it right now. Well, maybe after this episode. I did have a question for you. Yeah. So you talked about Brooklyn and finding out that you were pregnant with Brooklyn for the first time, and that, overwhelming moment that happened where you cried. I just wonder, like, was that a lot of fear as well, because you worked so hard for her, and then you were like, oh my gosh, what would happen? Now you it's not that you are in control, but you almost are more in control when it sets. Like how was that transition from like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to holy moly, I need to make sure that, you know, I don't run too fast or, I mean, all those fears, right, that we have.
Totally. And I mean, even this pregnancy, it's my 4th pregnancy and twins, like every single one was the same fears of like, am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? Am I eating the right things? Am I, you know, should I not be doing this? And actually with Brooklyn. So, we found out on a Thursday, I think. And that Saturday we went for this bike ride. And my doctor said it was fine, but I was clipped in, and went over these tracks and I actually fell. And I was just sobbing and I was like, oh my God, like, what if something happened to her? And everything was totally fine. My doctor then said, I probably wouldn't clip in again, you know? But so there were certain things like a lot of women will run through their first trimester. And I just never have because, and I know like from the science side of things as a nurse, I know that there's no like correlation that like running is going to cause miscarriage, but I also didn't want anything to blame because through their fertility process, like it brings a lot of guilt and self-blame, which, is something that like I've had to work through, you know, because I really did think like, at times I felt horrible and like, oh my God, would my husband have married me if he had known, you know, that I wasn't gonna be able to like have children for him. This was before we had kids, obviously, you know, but I really had this like horrible, like, this is my fault. There's something wrong with me and I'm causing this and affecting all these other people. So, and you know, it's not like the first trimester ends and then all of a sudden like all the fear goes away. It's just every step. And I think it's for every mom, like it is, not just with fertility, but you're like, okay. And then is the like anatomy scan going to be okay? Or if you do genetic testing, are they going to be okay? And I remember saying that to my dad, like, you know, every ultrasound, I'm like, are they going to be okay? Or you hear the horrible stories of people with pregnancy loss, whether it's early in the first trimester or late losses. And it's just, it's such a like blow to the gut because seriously, I can't even like process how horrible it is and how many people go through that. But, I remember saying to my dad, like, you know, I worry so much and then you worry about like, you're going to get to delivery and how that's going to go and what that's going to look like. And, you have this grand plan and it never really turns out the way that you think it'll be as this, such a journey. Seriously. Anyways. And he was like, Shan, he's like, let me tell you something. You're 29 years old and I still don't stop worrying about you. So it was just such a beautiful reminder that like, you will always worry. Like motherhood is just about because you love so much and your heart just explodes and grows more than you've ever possibly known when you have kids, you know, that, the worry never stops. But I think that anyone that's been through a fertility journey or some type of loss, would say that it certainly feels heightened throughout. But I just, you know, all I can do is any of us can do is just try to really like relish every single day. Like, and that's what I tried to do because every day that I was pregnant was something that I had never experienced before, especially with Brooklyn the first time, you know? And so I just tried to like find gratitude and joy, in the present and try not to worry too much about what was to come. And it's much easier said than done. I know that, but,
it is definitely something you have to work on.
Yes. And every day, very minute. Like conscientious about. So, and, I would say with this pregnancy, my twin pregnancy, it's even more heightened. Just knowing, there's a lot more risks for twin pregnancies. So we met with like our specialist, I guess a week and a half ago, and she was running through, okay, so we're going to first talk about risks for moms that are increased. And then we're going to talk risks for babies and like all these things, you know, and it'd be very easy to just be like, oh my God. But again, I'm just trying to be like, okay, all I can do is take care of me. And, you can probably see that book over there. It's on like multiples, twins and triplets. And this woman, she's like really well researched and talks about how important it is that you gain 20 pounds by 20 weeks, or some say 24 by 24, and, you know, try to take care of yourself. So that, like, I think that's all we can do is just control the things that we can to give ourselves the best outcome. Cause they say like the weight gain then really decreases the risk for preterm labor, which is really high with twins. And so, there's been a lot more and different like worries and stresses this pregnancy versus other pregnancies. But I'm also just trying to really, again, enjoy every part of it. Cause it's going to be my last for sure. Someone the other day was like, are you done after this? I'm like, we are done at 5.
Yeah.
Husband would kill me if I was like,
you're like, we're a party of 7.
Yes,
that's when they start like charging you gratuity at restaurants because you have too many people. Yeah. My sister has 4 kids, so she's a party of 6.
Oh yeah.
But she always is taking on every other like baby in the world, just helping out moms. She's the best. So I feel like every time we go somewhere, she's like, party of 10, 15. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know.
Do we need the whole restaurant? Like,
I guess the only good thing is that some restaurants like only take reservations if it's party of 6 or more. So I guess we're all set there.
There you go. You'll always get a good seat.
Yeah.
That is good. Okay. So the last treatment of IVF, you mentioned that you got the call that none of them took after your implant of the 2. Mm-hmm. When did you find out that you were pregnant with the twins?
So, that's one thing I didn't explain. You have this 9-day waiting period.
Okay.
So from when they transfer, so egg retrieval happens. Some clinics will transfer in at day 3, but now I think more of the literature shows that, day 5 embryos, like if they make it to day 5, this blastocyst, they have the best chance for actually implanting. And so they transferred, we had a day 5 transfer and they transferred the 2 in, and then some clinics make you wait 2 weeks, but our clinic's always been 9 days. So they call it the 2-week wait in infertility world. I've got to tell you, it feels like 2 years. Most people are like, what do I do during this time? And literally it's just like, keep yourself as busy as you can, like do whatever you can because you are just waiting. And, like I said, some people will test at home. And I was really torn whether or not to, but you don't want to do it too early because you often have that HCG in your system. There can be false positives, there can be false negatives. So again, it's just this whole kind of mind F, without saying the actual word. But we did decide to test at home. And so we had transferred on a Friday and I tested on day 6, which was a Thursday. And it was positive. And so, but again, you don't want to get your hopes up or, you know, I'm like, what if it's not? So I literally like tested every single day until that following Sunday, which was day 9. And we went in for the blood test, and then got the call a couple hours later and she was like, congrats. And, at that point you have no idea. So like the HCG level sometimes with twins can be like really high, but with a single one, it could be high on that first level. And then they test every 48 hours. 48 to 72 because they want it to double basically in 48 to 72 hours. So
do you have to go in to get these tests? Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
a lot.
Driving back to, it's so many appointments. Yeah. But so then we got another level and again, it's like, people are like, do you think it's twins? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. And so then about a week and a half after that, we went in. I was just about like 5 weeks and some change. So all they could see was that there was 2 sacs. But at that point, there's no way of knowing like, are both actually growing, but there was 2 sacs. And, my doctor was like, you seem surprised that it worked. I'm like, well, we've done this before of putting in 2 and 2 never took. And then we went in about a week and a half later and there was heartbeats for both of them. And which is again, one of the most like reassuring, most beautiful sights that I've ever seen. And I remember her saying to me, and I had my same exact doctor the whole time. And she said to me, can you like, think about like, if you would have like thought about this, 5.5, I guess would have been 6 years ago. Would you have ever imagined that you'd be here, with your 3 kids and pregnant with twins now? And I said, no. And I was just sobbing and, thanked her for everything. And I didn't even know the whole time, but she actually is a twin mom too. So she is like, if you ever need advice, let me know.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
That just has to be so relieving and so terrifying at the same time. I mean, just all of it, like the work that you put into having your family is inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing. I mean, I felt like I had a lot of doctor's appointments and I couldn't imagine the like time and, going back and forth. And then you also had kids and you were working with all of this. I mean, and plus you're owning your own business with being a Beachbody coach and trying to be fit. And that's just a lot that you take on all the time. So kudos to you
for
doing that.
That's
amazing.
I think we all do what we have to do, but that
is true.
To survive and to, try to get like to our vision of what we want our family to be,
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're pregnant with twins now. That's exciting. And when we were introduced through a friend of ours, mutual friend, I obviously was like, oh, I got to know this girl. And so I was looking at you on Facebook and Instagram, and you had a picture of you pretty new pregnant with the twins. And you talked about like the value of sharing your pregnancy early to you.
Yeah.
Which we all know. And I know this too. Like I found out we were pregnant with Grayson super early, 4 weeks, actually same thing. Like I just took a test and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And then went to the doctors. I was like, oh, I really am pregnant. Like that's crazy. That was really fast. And so we found out really early. So that waiting period of telling people was so hard to do. But for my husband, it was really important. And I didn't have a lot of the same fears, but again, I had never been in it, and so I didn't know what it felt like to be pregnant. I didn't know what it felt like to lose a baby. And so I think I was a little naive in that whole regard. But I'm curious, like you having such a journey to get to just becoming pregnant, like why is it important for you to share, hey, I'm pregnant. I don't know what this is going to do, but.
Yeah. So, with my first 3 pregnancies, even though like with the first one, I had this support group, right? I still I told like my best friend and my sister that I was going through the cycle. It wasn't until the 3rd one, I think, like we told both sets of our parents, even because I felt like I didn't want anyone else to go through the emotional roller coaster that I was going to have to go through, because I knew how hard it is. And I knew that if it didn't work, like how sad my mom would be for me, and so we were very quiet about it. And I think the fear of like, if it fails, feeling like a failure or something, or having to tell people like that's a very real feeling and fear. Yeah. And so for the first 3, we were pretty quiet about it. And then, we told like our parents right away when we did get pregnant. But for those 3, we did what everybody else does mostly. And we waited until we were through that first trimester. And this time, before going through the IVF, I don't know what changed in me. I honestly think part of it is, being a Beachbody coach, is that, I have become more like open and sharing things, about my life. And I think because I've realized that it's, a healing process for me, to be able to connect with other people that have been through it also, but then being able to hopefully like help others on their journey. And so my thinking was like, if I could share my IVF journey, this whole time of like just walking people through like step by step of what to expect, that hopefully then anybody else that has to go through it would feel comfortable like reaching out to me, or if I was maybe their only like one support, or that they would have that, because of the times that I felt so completely alone in it. And so I decided, I had a conversation with my husband and like make sure he was on board with it and sharing it, because it is very public and it's very open, and some people don't agree with it. But again, and my dad said it best once, like he was like, it's amazing. Like if you can help one other person, like then it's going to be all worth it, and that really was my thought, is if I can just help one other person on their journey, it's worth it to me to be vulnerable and to share that. And so I had started sharing my story, like every step of the way of like, okay, today's retrieval day, today's transfer day.
Oh, you started at the very beginning.
Yes, this time, but never before. And so then it was kind of like, well, I have to tell people I'm pregnant, but at the same time, I just wanted it to be like totally out there and share with people. And in hindsight, I thought about it a lot. And I think this is the post you're referring to of like, why we keep it a secret and why I felt the need to keep it a secret. And I think it is that fear that you might lose the baby or whatever might happen. But this time I just thought, my gosh, like the support I received, like just through the process to become pregnant this round, was so overwhelming, of support and love for the most part.
Were there people that you mentioned earlier, some people don't agree with what IVF?
No, just me being so open about it. It just made them uncomfortable, I guess. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I mean, and I don't know. I'm not saying everybody else has to share their story, but for me, it was actually like the easiest IVF process I've been through because I wasn't carrying the secret. And I felt like through my IVF process and then even like the first trimesters of my other pregnancies, I was carrying this secret, which is really hard. Like, you know, you're pretending you're drinking wine because you don't want people to know you're pregnant. And I get it. I totally get it because I did it the first 3 times. But this time it was like such a relief to be like, oh, I'm actually 5 weeks pregnant. And God forbid if something happened, I knew that then I would have just this whole like network of support of family and friends and other people that would catch me when I fell. And again, I just wanted to be super transparent and just show people the whole journey because I've been always really open about the fact that my kids are IVF, but people that haven't been through it or, you know, don't know people that have gone through it, might not know all that it entails. And it's a lot.
It is a lot.
And you know, I've just had so much supportive people that are like, this is really fascinating to me actually, but also, you know, I hope that even if someone hasn't gone through it themselves, if they're reading and following my journey, that then they have a friend or a sibling or somebody who ends up going through it, then they, better know like what the process is like, and then maybe can best support them, I guess. So, and it really has been just this like huge weight off my shoulders of like not pretending why I'm going to appointments or not pretending like, I mean, because I'm a health and fitness coach, I like share my workouts on Instagram stories. And so to all of a sudden like not be working out but I didn't want to lie about it either because that's just not my nature. So it was so nice to just be totally honest of like, this is exactly what we're going through or whatever. And so, it's not what everyone would want to do. And I don't think everyone should have to, and everyone gets to choose that. But it really was, it felt really good this time to not feel like I was carrying this secret with me.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Like that added pressure almost was off. But I also understand that being vulnerable and being open about something so personal can also be really hard. Mm-hmm. So I get both sides of it. Like I mentioned, I really just wanted to tell I was so excited. I just wanted to tell everybody I was pregnant. I couldn't wait until that 12-week mark. But I also, you know, heard from a lot of people, like it can be really hard to do that publicly if something else was to happen.
Right. And like telling to untell would really be hard too.
Yeah, it would be hard. Yeah. But I also think that there's something really great. Like I've never gone through that experience, but just from hearing your story, from following on Instagram, like there's little pieces of that I can really appreciate. And so now when I see a mom who is going through that, I understand at least an element of the strength and the work that it takes to build your family, where the strength and the work just looks different for me. And you mentioned before, like practicing gratitude, which I'm big on. I love Brene Brown and all of her wisdom, but I think also by sharing your story, it helps other people practice gratitude. Because obviously motherhood is a journey and it's got curveballs and it's hard and it's easy and all the things, right? But I think hearing somebody's story to get into motherhood helps me practice gratitude. Like when I'm frustrated or when I'm having a hard day, like it's a really good thing for me to be like, man, I'm so grateful that was my journey into motherhood and that I get to watch all these strong women do it differently. But like that gratitude that I get from it and that I'm sure other moms get from it is so big too. Like it's so helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's helped me find even more gratitude too, because motherhood is not easy. I mean, anybody that tells you differently, I'm like, I don't know who you are, but I don't know that exists because it is hard and it's so hard. I mean, it's a journey, but I think too, it's like, you know, it feels like this horrible, hard day, or like literally, was it last night? My husband was out at a meeting, and my son and daughter were fighting over who was closing the window. And my 3-year-old son literally bit her, like the worst bite I've ever seen. And so it's moments like that where like, you've got to be kidding me. But like, so my life is not perfect by any means. But I think the thing about it is that there's really hard days and there's really hard nights, and you're having these sleepless nights. But like in those newborn phases, even it was like, and I think every mom feels this way. Like, you don't care how tired you are or how little sleep you've been getting. Like, you look at that beautiful face and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is all worth it. And I think particularly like the journey that we went down, I feel like there's nothing I can do but just be so thankful that we have our kids and our family, and 2 more on the way. And I just feel incredibly blessed. And I just can only hope that other moms that are struggling with fertility or becoming mothers can have that same joy and gratitude. And I truly believe that, you know, we always have this vision of like what our family's going to look like. And I remember my sister before, after we had our first failure, she was like, I wish I could give you a picture 10 years from now of your family. She's like, 'cause you will have a family. She's like, I don't know what it's going to look like, you know, but you are going to have a family. I wish I could give you a picture so that you could see, you know? And, I think that's like such a great thing to remember, is that it might not be the journey that you imagine. But if your goal is to be a mom or to have a family, you will get there in some way, whether that's through fertility treatments or adoption or a surrogate. I've met so many people that have gone so many different routes, or that you get naturally pregnant and you don't have to do any of that. But it's just such a journey, and such a beautiful journey, no matter what you go down. And there's going to be big hills and valleys, but it really is all worth it at the end of the day. And my youngest brother was actually adopted from Korea. And so for the longest time, like, we talked about adoption as an option too. And but decided to try the IVF route first. And so I just think there's so many ways and means to become a mother. And it's just inspiring to hear how people do it. And like you said, I find so much, I see so much strength in other women, particularly ones that have suffered far more losses than I have, and are just able to, you know, carry on with their life and still be these like positive rays of light, and find hope in their journey and all of our journeys. And I think that's all you can do. And I've actually always, my sister, for my first one, I had a bracelet that said there is always hope. And the necklace I'm wearing for this one, I would always have something with every IVF cycle, just because I just needed something to cling to. And this is, it says hope in, I can't remember the dotted lines, you know, of,
in like Braille?
Braille? Yeah, not Braille, but the other, anyways. Yeah. So it says hope in that. But I think like that was the one thing that kept me afloat, is just like holding on to that hope, that I would become a mom one day. So
yeah, that's so good. Well, Shannon, I really appreciate your time today. You've given us a lot of wisdom from the beginning to now, but I'm just curious, like overall, like what's your overarching advice for a mom, whether it be someone that's going through IVF or just someone that's in the newborn phase, or maybe they have older kids? Like, what's your ultimate advice for moms?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Your biggest lesson learned.
People give me advice. No, I think
we love to give advice as parents.
Yeah. I would say the biggest piece of advice I can get, and I think so many moms, I've heard this, that they say the days are long, but the weeks and months will fly by. And having an almost 5-year-old, I would say that could not be more true. Because those first weeks, months, sometimes year and a half or whatever of parenting feels so hard, and you're so tired sometimes. But I think just remembering to try and savor the moment. And there was one thing I'd read one time that was like hold on to all the moments, whether they're really, really hard or really beautiful, because you want them to you want to remember those. And pretty soon your kids are not going to want to crawl into your lap or cuddle, like, mommy, cuddle with me at night. And those things that I will miss so dearly. You know, I talk about, like, we were talking about earlier of like wiping bums and changing diapers and like how nice it'll be when we don't have to do that. But at the same time, I know I will absolutely miss that phase and that stage. So again, just finding gratitude and the beautiful moments, no matter how chaotic or loud or crazy your house is, because if you're ever at our home with 3 kids, 4 and under, it is all of those things, but it's also just complete beautiful chaos. So, so good. Just finding joy and remembering that it'll go far too quickly, the good and the bad. So,
I love that you said that. I'll tell you one thing that popped to my mind was we have friends that have older boys, like 5 and 8. I'm going to mess up their ages because I'm terrible. But we were at their house recently. We hadn't seen him in a while. And Grayson has a binky. And it's a long story, but it's a very big fear of mine. Like removing the binky from him is a big fear that I have. And like I'm anxious about that period. And so I remember he was eating it, like sucking on it. And they were like, oh, I missed that phase. And I thought, that is so funny. I hate this phase. Like, cause I'm terrified of what's the next step. But they were like, look at it just as he sucks on it. And I was like, oh gosh, like, do you want to remove the binky from him? It's terrible. But now whenever I see him have a binky, not every time, but most times since that time, I'm always like, oh, someday, even though it's going to suck when I have to remove that from your mouth and never give it back to you, someday I'm going to miss when you ask for it or when you have it in your mouth or when he tries to stick more than one in his mouth at a time. Like someday we will miss those times. So just to grasp them, even if they're cause you a little bit of anxiety or joy or pain. I think that's really good advice. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Well, thank you for spending time with me today. You are such a busy mom, so I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate that. And I know a lot of women are going to listen to this and be very inspired by you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just am completely honored that you asked me to share my story. So thank you. And I love your podcast already. I'm so excited to see how it grows.
Okay,
so thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you loved it. Please subscribe to this podcast so you can get the latest episodes and tell us what you think about it in the reviews. And mamas, I love you.